All right. So in general, if I now go to hire business process, you see the default definition over here. Even in this particular tenant, you are seeing multiple definitions for hire, and that is because this is a GMS tenant. It's similar to the tenant that you also have. GMS is a fictional company that is set up by Workday. So whenever they give tenants for demo purposes, they will give the GMS tenant. So it will have some company, a company called Global Modern Services already set up in that tenant. So this is the same tenant. Now let me go to the higher default definition. So this is how a sample higher definition will look like. You can see there are about 24 steps. And this is about how a general definition for hiring an employee looks like. So in your sample tenants, you just see one or two steps, but in reality, you will have more than that. So generally, there are about 24 to 30 steps when we hire an employee. And if you look at it, you can see that there are different actions and different people who are responsible for taking those actions in Workday. So I'll be starting to use one of these business process. So this is the higher default. I might use another one. Maybe I'll use this one. Yeah. So this is a bit more simple than the one that we just saw. I might use this one to explain the rest of the concepts of business process. So last time I remember we were discussing the rule-based business process definitions. Anyone remembers what is a rule-based business process? Rule-based business process. Okay. So based on a rule, based on the result of a rule, if the rule is true, it will trigger the rule-based business process. If the rule is false, it will trigger the default definition. So we are going to test this out. But before that, we'll have to first create a supervisory org. So I'm just going to create one single supervisory org for the sake of testing. I'll create a new reorganization. I'll call this Acme. I'm using a different name, not Amazon. So I'm calling this organization Acme LLP. Okay. I'll give this subtype as company, visibility, everyone. There is a reason we create subtype and a reorganization. Reorganization, I think I explained what exactly a reorganization is. But if you guys are still confused about what a reorg is, see, in Workday, there are things that are effective dated. You understand what is an effective dated item, right?
Yes, yes.
Effective dated. I hope everyone else knows it as well. So there are things that are effective dated in Workday. If suppose this is a glass, it has this much water at 8 a.m. I had some water, maybe I had some water from this jug at 9 a.m. If I consider this as a Workday object, for example, this it had this much water. Now it has only this much water. If I consider this as a Workday object that is effective dated, suppose when I created this jug, I used a reorganization and the date I used on the reorganization. Okay, that is the point. Date on the reorganization was, let's say, 01 01 2024, 8 a.m. Now, at the time 9 a.m., 01, 01, 24, 9 a.m., there were some changes done. Okay, so when you check the status of this particular object between 8 a.m. till 8:59 a.m., you will see that the jug had this much of water. But when you check the status of this object at 9 a.m., you will see it has only this much water. Okay, because this much water is lost. So basically, that is what reorganization does. It captures the changes to the organization. That is why it is called as reorganization. Whenever you create an organization or reorganize the object, it will capture all those changes in that reorg event, and that reorg event is effective dated. Every time you create a organization, you need to use a reorganization. When you are creating an organization in Workday, you need to use a reorg event, because you need to capture the date, the effective date when it happened, and then all the changes will be also tracked going future in that
Yes.
reorganization event. It
Yeah,
is for the
that
date.
is, yeah, you answered it, Nikhil.
All
That
right.
was the question actually. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Subtypes are again, um, see, subtypes are not a required field. I mean,
Right.
you can mark it as not required, depends from client to client. Most clients will use a subtype because they would want to classify their organizations further. They might
Yes.
be having departments or a company or whatever. So most of them, I have seen they use subtypes. However, there is a task called as configure optional fields. Okay, in that you can go and mark this subtype as not required.
Okay,
You can
got it.
hide it, so it will not become mandatory. So we were discussing about the rule based, right? So a rule based definition, so a rule based definition will trigger only if the rule is true. Otherwise it will always trigger the default definition. Okay, so let us go to the tenant first. Okay, now I have this supervisory org created. Let me look at one of the create position business process. So let's see if we have, all right, we have a create business process, and there is a default definition, and you can see that there are some definitions that are copied. So you can see create position for global modern services, meaning this create position business process was copied on top of global modern services business supervisory org. That's why you see create position for global modern services, create position for non-implementation account group. But if I want to create a rule-based definition, you can see if I create rule-based, it will show it this way. Create position in the brackets, it will show acquisition. Now the way we created this specific definition is simple. You go to the business process. In the business process, you see copy or link definition. So here in the rule-based workflow definition name, here you can say acquisition and click OK. When you click OK, it will create this definition for you. So it will basically create the acquisition definition for you. All right, in acquisition, we just have one step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional step. I'll just add an additional step called approval in the create business process. And I want this approval from the HR partner. Maybe HR admin will be a better one. HR admin. Now the person that I'm using, Logan McNeil, for explaining this. So I'm proxied in as Logan McNeil, and it is very much possible that Logan McNeil has an HR administrator access. So I will also add an additional one more step called as a review instead of approval. Basically, because if it is an approval, it will automatically approve. But if it's a review, it will still trigger the review. So I'll just change this particular step to an action step. I'll just say it is a action step, and I'll say review position request HR admin, so that I want to make sure this particular step triggers. Okay, now we have a review step. Now let's go to our supervisory organization that we created and create a position. But before we do that, I want to also set up the rule-based definition. So let me go to, so once you create it, so here is where you create the definition, and this is where you set up the rule-based business process configuration. So if I go here, okay, 328, I'm just going to change it to, oh, that is fine. That is fine. 328 is fine. All right. So based on the current setup, whenever the position create position reason is acquisition, the acquisition rule-based business process will trigger. So I'm not trying to change anything in the existing setup because this particular tenant is used by a lot of people. A lot of my colleagues use this tenant for demo purposes, giving demo to the clients and all. So I'm not going to change or make any big changes to the config on this tenant. So I'm going to use the existing configuration as much as possible. So if you have seen, if you see the rule over here, this rule basically states that whenever you are creating a position, and if you choose the reason as create position acquisition, when you choose that reason, the create position acquisition business process should trigger. If this is not the reason, then do not trigger. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to also check the other reasons. Okay, this is fine. This is also fine. Okay. So let me go to our supervisory org that we created, CUP Acme. Here, I'm going to create a position now. So let me go to staffing, create position. I'll create two positions. The first one, let's say systems architect, only one position, availability date, today's date, earliest hire date, today's date. I'm not giving any job restrictions. And basically, I just want to create a position. And in the position reasons, I'm going to select okay. So in the reason, I'm going to select acquisition as one of the reasons. Now, when I submit this, you will see that I'm getting a review position request. I'm going to review this position and approve this. And now the position is created. Let me go to the business process of it. So if you go to the business process, go to the related actions of the transaction, business process, view definition. If you look at the definition here, you will see that the simplified version, the rule-based business process was triggered. You see, create position acquisition was triggered for creating this position of systems architect. The reason is I used the reason code as acquisition, which was what was mentioned in the rule. It mentioned if the staffing event category is create position acquisition, then trigger the rule based definition. Now let us see. I'm going to create one more position, but this time I will not use a reason called acquisition. I'll just use a random other reason. So let me go to the staffing and create another positions. I'll say business analyst. I'll give the same details. So the position created, availability date, earliest hire date, no job restrictions. And this time I'm going to use another one. So I'll just say staff new project and now submit this. So this time when I submit this, if I go to the business process here, if I go to the view definition, you will see that the create position default definition was triggered. The reason the default definition was triggered is because we did not use the create position acquisition. We basically used another event category, which was staff new project. So the rule-based definition did not trigger. What did trigger? It triggered the default definition here. So even if you have multiple conditions in the rule-based definitions, so what Workday does is, let's say you have rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, and rule 4. You have maintained 4 different rules and you have mapped it to the respective business process definitions. Workday, and then you have the default definition. Default. Okay. Now what Workday first does is, whenever you initiate a transaction, it will trigger the business process. Whenever you initiate a transaction, it will trigger the business process. And Workday will first go into the business process and check, hey, does it have any rule-based definitions? So these are all rule-based definitions. And then you also have copied over definitions. And again, like I said, no one uses it. So it is very rare that you will have a copy definition. So I'm not going to consider this into the equation at all. I'm going to only consider that we only have a rule-based definition. Workday is going to first check when you initiate the business process, it will check, hey, is this, which one of these rules is a true? If this is true, then this business process will trigger. If this is true, then this will trigger. If this is true, then this will trigger. If this is true, then this will trigger. If none of them are true, then the default definition will trigger. Now consider a scenario where um, 2 of them are true. So even this rule and this rule, both of them are evaluating to the value of true. Now tell me what will happen if there are 2 business processes conditions. So both the conditions are giving a value of true. Tell me what will happen in this particular case. So what happens is Workday is going to still trigger the default definition. The reason being, whenever you are creating multiple rules like this, the rules also have to be mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive meaning, if you have, let's say, 5 rules in place, at no time an employee should be eligible for more than one rule at a time. If an employee is eligible or is satisfying more than one rule at a time, this entire setup is going to fail, because now Workday says that there is more than one rule that is evaluating to true. So Workday is not going to decide for you, should I go with this or should I go with this? Workday will not go with either, it will directly go with the default. Make sense?
Nikhil, bit confused.
Hmm.
So uh, the
I'll
default,
explain again.
yeah,
I'll explain again. Okay. Let us define 2 rules here. For example, this is rule 1 and rule 2. So rule 1 says employee is a manager. Then it will trigger create position manager. Okay, this is one rule based definition. I am going to say employee location is India. If it is India, then it will trigger a business process called create position India. This is also a rule based. So this is rule based definition 1. This is rule based definition 2. And then we also have the default definition. We have a default definition. Okay. Now suppose a scenario where you are hiring an employee in India who is a manager. Suppose in that case, what happens is the employee from India? Is this rule true? It is true. Employees manager. Yes, even that is true. Now Workday is now confused because both of them have their own business process definition. Should it trigger the create position manager business process definition, or should it use create position India definition? If only one of them was true, then Workday would have directly just initiated that one. But if both of them are evaluating to true, what Workday does is it will not initiate either of them. It will always initiate the default definition, meaning at no point in time should two rules have the same uh, at any point in time, no two rules should be satisfied for the worker. Either it should be only one, at one point only one rule, only then the rule based definitions will work. So let me first, before even I do that, let me show you this particular definition. So it says it has to go to HR partner and then com partner and then manager. What I'm going to do is I want to skip these steps because I don't want these steps to initiate. So I'll just add a step condition to skip it. I'll just add a condition to skip. So I'm just adding those skip conditions here, calling false. We can check the rule if you want. So this is the rule that is configured, is false. This is a delivered field called is false, which it will return the Boolean value false. So is false equal to yes? Yes. So it is always false, then it will always execute to false. Because false is cannot be equal to true. If I put yes here, it means is false equal to true. No, if false will always be equal to false. So that is logic behind it. Now let me go and create a business a position. I'll go to here, I'll go here, go to staffing, and then I'll create a position. So when I initiate the business process, so when I submit this, so here I'm giving all the reasons. Yeah. So if I'm using create position acquisition, see every business process, if you take, there is a step called as initiation step. Any business process in Workday, you see you will have this initiation step. Initiation step is, this is the initiation step. When you click submit, it will first enter into this step, and in the initiation step it will determine which business process should it execute. Should it execute the default definition, or if I go to BP create position, it is going to check all this. Should I, which one of this should I execute? You have like 1 2 3 4 5 6 different versions of business process. This is the default definition, and then you have 1 2 3 rule based definitions and 2 copied definition. First it will check if the copied definitions are eligible, meaning are we using are we creating a position on one of these organizations, either global modern services or non-implementation account groups. If that is true, then it will use this one instead of the rule one. Now we have been creating it for what? Acme LLP. So it is, these two ones are now not applicable. Now next it is going to check which of these three rule based definitions will satisfy the requirement. So if I go to one of these business process, go to rule based business process configuration, here we have maintained three rules. Okay, so what is the first rule? The first rule is checking for P2E, so position to employee. So basically it's some rule, and it says workforce action event is equal to yes. So this is not equal to yes, hence this particular definition will not trigger. The second is create position acquisition. So this is checking if the reason code that we are using is the acquisition reason code. So staffing event reason category is create acquisition. If you look here, that is what I'm using. So the second one will trigger. The third one, this is looking for if it's a reorganization or studio. So that is a different concept. It is checking if the mass action type is reorganization, mass action org modeler. That is not. So even this will not trigger. So only this particular will trigger because only one of these conditions are true. If none of these conditions are true, it will go back to the default definition, which is the default definition will trigger if none of them are true. If two of them are true, it will trigger the default definition, because at any point in time only one of these rules should satisfy and the corresponding business process will execute. If two rules satisfy, Workday is not going to decide which one of these business process it has to trigger. It will only trigger the default definition. Now let us discuss some of the different uh, other concepts like condition rules and validation rules. Now, if you're working as a consultant on any AMS project, if it's a support project, as and when the company grows, their business process will go through a lot of changes, and you might be creating a lot of condition rules and validation rules to support that changes. What are those? What is a condition rule and what is a validation rule? If you remember, when I went to this default definition of the create position business process, I added these conditions over here. If false, don't execute. So whenever you want a specific condition or a specific step in Workday to execute or not execute, if you want to enter that particular step conditionally, meaning only if this particular condition is a true or only if this condition satisfies, then execute this step. If this condition doesn't satisfy, then you should skip this step. So that is what you are giving the instruction to Workday. Whenever you are entering step B, first execute this condition. If this condition is true, you see there is an if here. If this condition is true, then you execute this action step. If this condition is false, then you skip this step because it is not required as per the condition maintained. So now let me just go and create another position. This time I will not use any specific I will not use acquisition reason code. I'll basically say just create a condition with a random reason code here. So I'll say it is understaffed. So create position request, staff new project. So when I submit it, it is going to Joy Banks, who is the approval chain manager. But if you look at the business process now, the initiation step is completed. All these steps are deemed as not required. The reason being, if I open this particular step here, for this step to enter or for this step to execute, we have to make sure that this condition needs to be true. But since this condition is a false, this particular step is not executing, and it is only executing the last step because the first four steps have a false condition, because I manually wanted to skip. I wanted to make sure these steps don't execute, so I added an additional condition that will make sure it will skip. Now this is a very
Yes.
simple condition. In reality, you will have a very different conditions. For example, in real time scenarios, the conditions will look like, let's say, let's take a business process like hire, for example. So when you are hiring in a business, like let me show you the hire business process that we have here. It might have a lot of conditions. So if I go to the default definition of the hire business process, you will see there are a lot of conditions maintained here. Like for example, there is a to-do step called local employee documentation. This step is only executed if the country is USA. So basically it is checking if the primary address work is United States of America. If it is USA only, then this second step will execute. If it is not USA, if the employee is not from USA, this step will not execute. Similarly, you have a lot of other conditions like did not pass background check. Now this is coming from recruitment. So there is a background check business process in the recruiting BP where it is part of Workday recruitment, but from Workday recruitment you can directly hire an employee. So if the employee did not complete or did not pass the background check at the time of hire, you can also submit a background check request. Okay, so these are the conditions. Based on the value of these conditions, Workday will determine if it has to enter that particular step or it will not enter that particular step. Okay, so for a condition rule, so let's say this is a business process, step A, step B, step C, D, E. So you have a condition 1 here, a condition 2 here, condition 3 here, and condition 4 here. Only if this condition is true, only if the conditions are true, then these steps will be executed in Workday. Now the very first step, this is called as the initiation step. Why it is called as initiation step? This is the step where we enter the data. So whatever the details of the transaction, it is entered and you click the submit button, right? So it will first initiate the business process and then it will execute the steps on the business process. Now, at the time of initiating, so basically what are you submitting? You are entering the data. So basically you are entering the details of the transaction or the data of the transaction, and then you are doing a submission, right? You're entering the data and then you are submitting the details. Now, whenever you are entering the data, if you want to check the credibility of the data, for example, let's say when you are creating the position, I want to make sure that the location is not empty. Basically, I want to ensure that you are always entering the location when you are creating the position. Until now, what we were doing, we were creating a position, we were just entering the required fields like the availability date, the earliest hire date, and we are submitting that particular position request. We are not entering any other details. However, your client says that whenever someone is creating a position, make sure the location of that particular position is not empty, meaning it should always have a value in it. Okay, so how do you make sure that someone, when they are requesting a position, they are entering this particular value? That is where we will use validation rules. So another concept is validation rules are only used on certain types of steps. So if I take A, B, C, D, E, if you're on the initiation step, you cannot use a condition rule. You can only use a validation rule. You can only use a validation rule on the initiation step, and you can use the validation rules on review step. So there are two places where you can use. You can use it on the validation step or on the initiation step, and you can use it on the review step. What you can use the validation rules. On rest of the steps, you will use condition rules. So all here you will use condition rules if you want to use it. On the initiation step, you cannot use a condition rule. You will only use a validation rule. So what is the difference between the validation and the condition rule? Apart from the functionality of it, meaning the condition rule is used to ensure that a particular step is only executed if the value of the condition is true. However, the validation rule is used to check if the details that are entered in the transaction is correct or not. So if the validation rule is true, Workday will give an error. Okay, let me explain you this. So let's suppose I want to add a validation that says the location is never empty. So the requirement is when you are creating a position, location should not be empty. Should not be empty. This is the condition, or this is the validation that I want to create. Whenever I create a position, I always want the location to be not empty. So how you will create the validation? I will create a validation that says location is empty. Now, if this condition is true, if this condition is true, then Workday will not let you submit. It will say an error saying that the location is empty. Whereas if the condition rule is true, only then it will let you enter that step. If the validation condition is true, it will not let you submit it. So until this is false, you will not, Workday will not let you submit that particular step. Let me create this for you. So let me go to the business process. I am going to the same create position business process. So I'll go to this acquisition business process here. Now here is where you can add the step condition. Basically, this is where you will add the step condition. On the initiation step, this is where you will add the validation rule. So go to the related actions, business process, maintain step condition. Now here, when I click on this, you will see that you'll see validation conditions. The reason being, on on the initiation step, you will always find only validation condition. You cannot create condition rules on the initiation step of the business process. So here I want to add a step that says location is not empty. Let me see if there is an existing rule that says, okay, it's not there. So I am going to create one rule, and here I'm going to say location. So let me see which locations we have. Okay, so this one looks fine. Location is not empty. And here I'm going to say location is empty. Okay, I'm going to add this condition, location is empty.
How can you finalize that location is suitable for this rule? So
You will
there are
understand.
several.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right. It depends on the business object that I'm using. So there are a lot of business objects in Workday. So you should have some understanding of how Workday works, and what I say, this again comes with practice. Now I know that there are multiple business objects in Workday, so each of these location report fields are there in different business object. Like this is worker object. I have position and related snapshot interface object. What I want to use is the position management business object. So the location from the position management, hence I chose this one. It comes with a bit of practice and a bit of understanding of reporting, which is something that I'm going to teach you in the coming days. You will
Okay.
understand a bit of reporting, and then you will understand, okay, which business object to choose. I will be explaining that. However, a lot of it will come from practice. Like when you start working, you will understand more and more. You'll get you'll get a better understanding of how different business objects work and which business object is best suitable for the situation. Initiation step is always required. Whenever you submit a transaction, the first step that we'll be executing is the initiation step. You might have seen some business process only has an initiation step because it does not have any further steps, but the initiation step will always be there because that is the step that will initiate the transaction. So, it could be that there might be only one step, only the initiation step, or if you have multiple approvals or any other action step, there might be, but initiation step will always be there. It will always be the first step. So you will always validate before you submit it. Now I have created a validation called location is empty, and I've created it as a critical validation. Critical meaning it will always error. You will not be able to submit if this evaluates to true. If I select it as a warning, it will give you an alert saying that, hey, location is empty. Do you still want to submit it? For now, I'm going to create it as a critical one, error. Now let us go and try to submit one transaction. So I have used it on. Now, whenever you create a validation, it will not show on the left side. It will always show on the right side under the column called as validation. Okay. So now let me go to our supervisory org and let me create another position. So what I'll do is I will just put the dates, no job restriction. I'm not entering any location over here. I'm just going to submit this. Wait a second. Oh, I did not use you know what happened? I did not use the reason code and then it executed the default definition. Let me just cancel this because we have created this validation condition only on the acquisition business process. So I created on this rule-based definition. So let me again create another position. Go to staffing. Now let us see if we are still getting that error or we are not getting that error. Let me see why we are not getting that error. So test rule. Okay, I should be using this one. Okay, let me cancel this transaction again. So let me go to this validation condition. Let me edit this validation condition. So instead of this field, let me use hiring restrictions, location, contain location restrictions for the position. I just changed the rule a little. Let's try it again. So the last time the report field that I used was not correct. So that's why I got that error. I mean, that's why the error did not trigger. So let me try again. So let me go to the staffing, create a position. Here I'll give the same Workday analyst acquisition 28, no job restrictions, submit. Okay, now you see, if I have not entered the location, it is now giving an error. It says location is empty. Now, where is this location is empty is coming from? If you look at the validation condition name, location is empty. The reason is I have mentioned the hiring restrictions proposed location is empty. So when I'm not giving a location, it is giving me an error. So your client might require similar kind of validations where it says that, hey, I want to make sure the whomsoever is requesting a create position, they have to enter some of these details, like they have to enter the position, they have to enter the details of the location. I also want them to enter the time type and the worker type. Unless they enter these values, I don't want them to submit this particular transaction. Let's say your client says job profile should not be empty. Your client wants the job profile should always be available when you are creating a position. If you say job profile, if someone is creating a position without any job profile, then they should not be able to submit it. Now, how will you create a validation? You will not say that job profile is not empty in the validation. That is a requirement that you have. You don't want the job profile to be empty. So you will create an opposite in the validation. You will say, you will check if the job profile is empty. Basically, you are checking if the job profile is empty. If the job profile is empty, which means true, it will give error.
Right, got it.
If the job profile is not empty, if you have a value in the job profile, this will become false. So when it becomes false, the error will not trigger, because it will only trigger when this particular validation condition is true. However, for condition rules, you want the condition to evaluate to true, only then the step executes. You will not use validation. You cannot create validation conditions on these steps other than the initiation step. There are only two places in Workday where you can create a validation. One is the initiation step, and the second is the review step. On the review step, you can have both condition as well as validation. If I go to the review in the review step on the let me go to the business process. So on there is a review step on the acquisition, right? If I go to the step maintain step conditions of the review step, you see there is a entry condition. This is a condition rule. You also have a validation rule. Do you know why we have entry condition and a validation condition? The reason being, so a review step in Workday, the reason is how the review step works in Workday. So what a review step is, basically, let's say someone has entered some details and submitted the transaction. And then let's suppose a business process like this, a big business process, it has a lot of steps like this. Okay. It is initiated, then someone enters some step, someone enters another action, and then step D is a review. Now in the review step, they will get a consolidated details page of all the details that were entered from the initiation till from A till step D. They will get all the details that were entered in that particular step. Now the person who will be reviewing these details, they have an option to also change the values in these. Okay, they might want to change this, they might want to change this and add another value. However, if you also want to ensure whatever values that they are changing is in accordance to what you want to be changed. For example, I don't want the person who is reviewing to remove the location, even though at the initiation there is a validation condition and someone entered the location. I don't want the reviewer to remove it, so I might want to add the same validation at the review step so that they will not remove it. Understood? For example, let's say I am going to add the same validation here. Location is empty, the one that I created. I added as a critical validation. All right. So now let me go to this. So here I'm getting this error, right? I'm going to add a location called New York. And I submit it. Now when I submit it, I don't see the error because I have provided a location. Now when Logan McNeil is getting a review step, what I can do, the Logan McNeil can also change it. I can say Workday engineer. She has this option to change the details of the position. I can say that I can remove this location. Now, if I try to remove it, I'll just submit this. It is giving an error saying that please choose at least one restriction in the job. Let me see if I can submit it as it is. Oh, it is letting me submit. So now let me again check. Okay, wait a second. At the time I initiated the create position request, there was no validation condition on the step B. I added it later. I added it in the mid of the process, right? If I go to this particular, where is that? So I was creating, this is a business process that got initiated when I created the position. If I go to the business process view definition, you will see that the definition in the step B, it does not have a validation. If I search for the latest version of the business process, you will see there is a validation. However, if I go to the transaction, the business process transaction that was used at the time I created that particular position, you are seeing there is no validation over here. The reason there is no validation is because of the effective date. So whenever you are making any changes to the business process, it is effective dated, and when whatever version you have at the time of initiating the transaction, that version will be used for execution. Anything that you created in the middle or after will not be executed in the current process. Does that make sense? What happened? Did you understand what happened?
Yes, yes.
Now, if I try the same thing, it will give an error because I have a validation also on the step B. Okay, so this is again something that you have to be very cognizant about. Let's say you are going through, okay, the client says that, hey, I'm not this particular, there is some problem in this particular step, or there is some problem in this business process. Can you check why it is happening? Because it was not happening in the past. Okay, so what you will do is you will check the business process as of a specific date. For example, I can also check this business process in, you see there is a view definition here. I can view this definition as of a earlier date. If I view this definition as of, let's say, 1st of March, you will not even see the review position request step, because that is something that I just added. You see, there is only the initiation step. The reason is, as of 1st of March, I did not add the review step. I added it effective today. So even if I check this as of yesterday, which is 27th according to Workday, you will still see that there is no review step because I did not add it as of 27th. As of 28th, I have added a review step in Workday, and you can see the same over here. I want to give a custom message. So location is empty is the name of the condition rule, and that is what it is showing in the error. It just shows the name of the condition rule. However, I want to say that the location you have entered is empty. Please enter the location and submit the transaction. I want to show this message. I don't want to show the location is empty as a message. So what can I do? I'll just go back to the business process now. Here is where I have entered the validation condition. Okay, I'm going to do two things. One is I'll go here in the maintain step condition. I'm just going to remove this first. Okay, next what I'm going to do is I'll edit this. The reason is I'm just reverting all the changes that I did. Like I said, this is my client tenant, so I'll just remove all this. Now what we have is just a we just have a initiation step with a validation. So what I'm going to do next is I am going to add a validation text. So what I want to show is I don't want to show location is empty. Instead, I want to show the location you have entered is empty, or you have not entered the location. Please enter the location and submit the transaction. I want to create a custom validation message. So you go to the validation condition, go to the related actions, and if you look at the validation here, configure validation message. So here you can add a text saying that the location you have not entered, or I'll just say the location is empty for the requested position. Please enter location and submit this transaction. Okay, so I have created a custom validation message. Now what will happen when you submit it, when you create a position? So I'll just go back here. I'll say create position. So go to staffing, create position. I'll say just going to add a test position, acquisition. You will still get an error, but this time you'll see the error will be, oh, wait a second. Okay, see, the location is empty for the requested position. Please enter the location and submit the transaction. So it is showing the custom validation error that we have configured on the validation. So this way you can also customize the validation to match your client's expectations. So the client might want to show a very peculiar or a very specific message as the error message. So you can configure that as well in the business process. Okay, this is basically just an alphabetical order. So you can create steps like this. You can also say A1, A2, A3. So it will execute this way. First this will execute and then A1, then A2, then A3. Then if you say B, okay, B1, B2, B3. So this way you can create any number of steps in Workday. Okay, so you can have, if your business process is too big, like it has 250 steps, for example, and this is a real-time scenario which I have worked on. There was a business process which had 250 steps in one of the clients that I handle, and they had it this configured this way. They had A1, A2, A3. You can also configure it this way: A, AAB, AAC, AAD. But this is like too complicated to understand. This particular client had it configured this way, so it was very difficult for me to understand how do I enter a step. Like for example, if I want to put a step here, I have to see A B1, something like this, and then enter it here. Instead, use this is the most easy way. A if we already have a condition, a business process like this, and you want to enter a step between A and B, you'll just make it as A1. That will automatically enter. If you want to enter it between A1 and B, make it A2. So it will become A1, A2, B. Okay. Now let us say if you want to execute two steps parallelly, like you want to execute A and A again, or if you want to execute these two steps you want to execute at the same time. So what you'll do is you will just mention it as C and C, A, B, C, C, and then you have E, or you can also make it as D. So when Workday sees that two of the steps have the same order, it will execute both the steps at the same time. So these are called as parallel steps in Workday. Whenever you have two steps with the same order, those will become parallel steps, meaning it will execute parallelly at the same time. Let us consider um, this scenario. So at the time of onboarding an employee, okay, onboarding is another module. It's a small module, very simple. So at the time of onboarding a worker, you want the employee to sign a few NDA documents. So there are some non-disclosure agreements. You have some company policy documents. You have, let's suppose there are 7 documents that you want the employee to sign. This is not like a physical sign. This is a digital signature, like DocuSign, right? Digital signature. So instead of sending one document, so they send an NDA, they sign. Once this is completed, they send another document, then they send another document. I don't want to send documents one by one. I want to send all the documents at the same time so that they can complete it all at the same time. So I will configure the steps in parallel so that all those steps are executed parallelly. This is one of the examples. There might be another case where the client might want the steps to be executed parallelly. So you will execute the step parallelly. This is one of the best examples. You
Got
want
it.
to,
Yeah.
okay. So there
Yeah.
will be cases where you might want to execute the step in parallel, and that is when you put the parallel steps. There might be another case. For example, let's say you have A, B, 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 and B. Now you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, but you have conditions on each of these steps. This is only for US, this is only for UK, this is only for Canada, this is only for India, and this is only for Italy. Even though you have 5 or 7 same parallel steps, all of them will not execute for any worker, because at any point in time only one of this will execute. Either it will execute for US based on the condition, because there is no point in time when an employee will be in both Canada and India, right? The location can either be Canada or India. It will not be both. So this is another way you configure it. You will have multiple steps, but you will put it as parallel, then you will have conditions to separate them. It creates like a group, right? It's all part of process design. If you ask me, is it mandatory? No, it's not mandatory. Does it make the maintenance in the future easy? Yes. So that's why you might want to configure the parallel steps, and that's the use case of parallel steps. See, a business process status is basically going to determine what is the status of the business process. So when you are doing a create position, when you are hiring the employee, what is the current stage of the business process? So the business process can either be in progress, or it can be in successfully completed stage, or it can be in cancelled state, or it can be also in rescinded stage. These are the stages that you have to understand. There are a few other transaction statuses, but those are not important at this point in time. For now, what you have to understand is, when you initiate a business process, the business process will be in progress stage. When you complete all the steps of the business process, it will go to successfully completed stage. Okay. Now, when you are initiating the business process and you are in progress stage, before you complete it, if you cancel the business process, then it will go in the cancel state. Now, another thing you need to understand is, you can only cancel a business process that is in progress. You cannot cancel a successfully completed business process. A successfully completed business process can only be rescinded. You cannot cancel a successfully completed business process. You can only rescind it. Similarly, you cannot rescind an in progress transaction. You can only cancel it. So you have in progress, you have successfully completed. These are the two stages of the business process. Now, if it is in progress, you have an option to abort that business process. That is how you will, that is by canceling the process. If you cancel the business process, that process will get cancelled. If the process has already completed, then you can only rescind that particular process.